Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is July 8th. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of John Berkenhout, the English physician, naturalist, and writer. John was born on this day, July 8th, in 1726. While studying at Edinburgh, John published a botanical lexicon reference, and in it, he wrote, "Those who wish to remain ignorant of the Latin language have no business with the study of botany." And it was on this day, July 8th, in 1822, that Caroline Herschel wrote in her diary about her brother, William Herschel, the German-English astronomer and composer. Caroline Herschel assisted her brother in his astronomical work, and today, Caroline Herschel is remembered for her work hunting comets. But it was on this day, 2 centuries ago, that Caroline wrote, "I had a dawn of hope that my brother might regain once more a little strength, for I have a note in my almanac of his walking with a firmer step than usual, 3 or 4 times the distance from the house to his library in his garden, for the purpose of gathering and eating raspberries with me. But I never saw the like again." William Herschel died about 6 weeks later at the age of 84, and this year is the 200th anniversary of his death. 41 years earlier, on the night of March 13th in 1781, William, with his homemade 6.2-inch reflecting telescope, discovered a new planet, Uranus. He initially thought it was, quote, either a nebulous star or perhaps a comet, and he named it George, Georgium Sidus, the Georgian planet, in honor of his patron, King George III. But surprisingly, the name did not stick, and George was renamed Uranus after the Greek god of the sky. Uranus is the first and only planet thus far to be discovered from a backyard garden. Today, William and Carolyn's Georgian townhouse and garden at 19 New King Street in Bath is the home of the lovely Herschel Museum. You can stand in the beautiful garden where William and Caroline spent so much time together, gazing at the stars. And by the way, William's son John became an accomplished astronomer and a polymath. He was involved in many other sciences, including botany. And it was on this day, July 8th in 1912, that a Mrs. F.E. Griggs of Raymond, Nebraska, began selling her surplus tomatoes. And she shared the story of her garden with nurseryman Henry Field for publication in his book, The Book of 1,000 Gardens. Now, bear in mind, this is 1912, and Mrs. Griggs, who sold over $50 worth of tomatoes from 135 plants, wrote this: "I had worked very hard for 4 months, and my garden was a very nice one, and I couldn't see it die. So I started to carry water a long distance up a 30-foot creek bank, but it didn't rain until fall. And the fall rains washed the fertilizer down, and they set the largest crop I ever saw. I pruned my vines severely and also pinched off all tomatoes that would be gnarled or poor shape as soon as I could see them, and it paid well in the nice crop of smooth ones that I got. The first were ripe July 4th, and on July 8th, we were already oversupplied and began selling the surplus to people who had no gardens at all this year. They were 15 cents per pound at first, and people said too dear to eat. So my first ones went for about 3 cents each. Later, as my customers acquired a taste for them, I got 5 cents, and then 7.5 cents, and then 10 cents per pound. but always 3 to 5 cents under the town retail price, although I had to deliver them. And in my haste, one foot slipped from the buggy step, and I fell, breaking and badly crushing my leg just above the ankle. But my heart was in the garden, and the following week, with this fractured limb in a plastered cast, I crawled down to the garden and gathered tomatoes. I'm still unable to walk much. The frost has just caught the vines uncovered with an enormous crop of ripe ones and green ones in all stages, just bushels of them. Fun to see a little blast from the past there in that letter. And today we celebrate the birthday of Monty Don, the English horticulturist and writer. He was born on this day, July 8th, in 1955. Monty once wrote, "I always see gardening as escape, as peace, really. If you are angry or troubled, nothing provides the same solace as nurturing the soil." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Peonies by Jane Eastoe. This book came out in 2018, and the subtitle is Beautiful Varieties for Home and Garden. And I should mention that the magnificent romantic photographs in this book are by the incomparable Georgiana Lane, one of my favorite garden photographers. Now, the publisher wrote this about Jane's book. From Shawnee Chief, that's a peony, to Top Brass, another peony, this guide to over 60 varieties of peonies presents an eclectic selection of specimens, from those with the best visual appearance and the most fragrant perfume to those that are easiest to grow and produce the best cutting flowers. With commentary on each bloom, easy-to-follow growing advice, and glorious photography, Peonies will appeal to anyone who appreciates the romance of the majestic peony. Well, as a garden plant, peonies are so long-lived. They're a personal favorite of mine. And because they are so long-lived, they're often also heirloom flowers and family flowers that get passed down from one generation to the next. And I was just telling my student gardeners that peonies are a favorite bridal flower. In fact, we were tidying up the peony beds and taking care of the plants with the spent blossoms. And even the blossoms that are at their very, very end look spectacular. Even with those little brown tips, those pale pink ones are just incredible. But peonies in general offer so much. And I like to say that their color, their fragrance, and those large blossoms elevate the peony as a worthy rival of the queen of flowers, which of course is the rose. Now, in her book, Jane begins with a solid peony introduction. She wrote, "To aid identification, the American Peony Society has classified 6 types of flowers: the single, the Japanese, the anemone peony. This is a peony that Maria Sibylla Merian always loved to paint. Then you have the semi-double, the double, and the bomb peony. And then there's a marvelous pencil drawing of each of these types of peonies. And Jane points out that rather than providing wordy descriptions, she provides this handy illustration where it's easy to see how one type of bloom differs from the other. And I loved this little illustration so much that I actually made a little copy of it, and I have it hanging in my garden library. It's just so handy. So she is right. It's much easier to show rather than tell the differences when it comes to the 6 types of peonies. Jane also wrote, "This book is designed to inspire you to grow your own peonies. There are thousands of varieties to choose from, with more being released every year. And in this book, we present a selection of personal favorites, a mix of old and new, and the cutting edge." And as these stunning pictures by photographer Georgiana Lane illustrate, there are peony varieties to suit every taste and every garden color scheme. Garden centers tend to offer just a few limited varieties, so if you want a particular specimen, it's best to seek out a specialist peony nursery on the internet. And then she concludes with, one plant will give you and generations to come great pleasure. And in our fast-paced world, there is nothing more therapeutic than a little peony gazing. And I heartily agree. In fact, if you get a chance to go and visit a peony farm, and we have plenty of those here in Minnesota, you should definitely treat yourself in early spring. That can be an outing that you add to your calendar, and it really is something extraordinary. Bring your kids, bring your camera, because I guarantee you're going to want to take lots and lots of pictures. But I love how Jane points out here that you might just want to reach out to specialty growers if you want a particular variety of peony. If you see something in Jane's book and you want to track it down, don't hesitate to get online and reach out to a grower, because there is absolutely no way that today's garden centers can offer every kind of peony. That's just not going to happen. So don't let your fear of shopping online for plants stop you from getting the peony of your dreams. They've really got packaging down to a science nowadays, and I have no hesitation about buying plants online anymore, and you shouldn't either. And if there is a problem, I know they'll make it right, especially if they are a reputable company. All right, you can get a copy of Peonies by Jane Eastoe and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $13. It's a great book. All right, we end today's show with a Botanic Spark that celebrates the birthday of one of my favorite writers, Anna Quindlen, the American journalist, author, and gardener who was born on this day, July 8th, in 1953. In October of 1988, Anna wrote an article that I personally love. It's one of my favorites of hers, and it's called Pardon the Garden, Pass the Pumpkin. And I thought I'd end the show today with a little excerpt from this very fun article. Here's what Anna wrote. I planted a vegetable garden. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The time was early May, and I hadn't had a really good vegetable in months. I got carried away. Vegetables look pathetic when they are small, just like children. 4 tomato plants, 1 pumpkin vine, single spray of zucchini or basil just don't seem like enough. Then they grow. This is why some people have several children. When they are small, they don't seem like so many. Then they grow, and pretty soon they are 6 feet tall and snacking on 4 fried eggs and a loaf of toast just before bed, and you know you've overestimated the demand. One morning, you go into the garden, and the zucchini are the size of clubs. There's nothing you can do with zucchini like that, except keep them next to the bed, in case you hear noises downstairs in the middle of the night. You can creep down the stairs with one of those things, and the right sort of burglar, the kind who knows his greens, will take one look at it and yell, "No, not the zucchini," and take off. This was my first year with pumpkins. I thought it would be fun to have a few in October when the zucchini plants would be yellowed, the tomatoes past their prime. I never really thought about how large they would become and how dumb a person would look bringing one to a dinner party in lieu of a Chardonnay while friends peeked from behind the blinds and whispered, "They've brought pumpkins again, Judith." Of course, the denouement was predictable. Everything ripened at the same time. In 1 week, 1,212 tomatoes turned red, all the pumpkins turned orange, and the zucchini disappeared. Oh, they didn't die. I left them in mailboxes up and down the road. Naturally, I tried to give away some of the tomatoes too, but it didn't work. Everyone else has the same problem. At the end of one driveway is a sign that says, "Don't even think of leaving produce here." It occurs to me that as a child, I was lied to when all the grown-ups told that grand story about how the Pilgrims invented Thanksgiving to share the largesse of their harvest with the Indians. The Pilgrims invented Thanksgiving to give away pumpkins and probably green tomatoes and enormous zucchini, too. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to The Daily Gardener. And just a reminder that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.